I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked. If you're that person who sets goals that challenge you to fully reach your potential, this show is for you. Because this is a show all about opening possibilities so that when you're hit with the unexpected, you have options from which to choose. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoy this episode of Unlocked, and if you do, make a comment in social media about what you learned and might do differently as a result. And if you are on YouTube, click the like button. Oh, better yet, subscribe. If you want to get more about the show, before or after, go to madelynblair.com/unlockedtv, and that includes all the replays of earlier shows. Please keep your topic ideas and questions coming. I love them, and I use them. So just send whatever you have in mind to madelyn@madelynblair.com. And check out my book, Unlocked. Discover how to embrace the unexpected. Now, if you would like to explore what it means to build and nurture your resilience with me, send me an email, madelyn@madelynblair.com, and I'll get back to you. Be sure to get on my mailing list as well, and I'll keep you informed about my new group mentoring program, Unlocking Together. Our topic today, 1 + 1 is 3. We'll begin with vision. Last week, I introduced a new segment on Unlocked where Dr. Ed Hoffman and I explored our thematic topic before bringing in our guest. We'll continue our exploration of this month's theme of vision, so suitable for opening the new year. So let me just do this and bring us to what we're calling is explorations. They're already in progress, so let's join them. Okay, Ed, we're still talking about kind of vision, but this time I want us to take it a little bit differently. I want us to really think about it from the perspective of the leader. Yeah. And what's the role here? Because I've often worked with people who say, oh, there's no point in writing a future story. I mean, that's just, pie in the sky. And I say to them, no, it's not. Because when you really have a vision of what you want to do, it actually energizes you. It pulls you to it, especially if that vision is in that vision, you recognize something that's true of you in yourself or your organization that it's done in the past. We can expand on that a little bit more, but I want to stop now and just pass the baton to you and see what your thoughts on this.
One of the, so this, I guess, gets into what I did right for my life. I studied leadership at Columbia. I was able to get into NASA. And NASA is fundamentally about how do you go into new destinations? How do you explore, right? Explorations is what we're talking about. And I always remember I think it was a quote from Noel Tishy when he was working. He was at Columbia University. He was at Michigan. He did a lot of work with General Electric. And he said that the role of a leader is to define reality and to basically engage resources for action. And I always thought that's a strange definition. What do you mean define reality? Doesn't everybody know reality? Why do you have to? And as we know, as you go through life, reality is not a straightforward thing. And it's a very difficult thing. How do you get an organization to think about we need to go in this direction? How do you get an organization to know we're going in a bad place? How do you get us to say we want to go this way? And so I think that the ultimate issue around the leader is the complication is that we work with others. One of the things every once in a while I'd hear from leaders, project leaders at NASA, this would be a great job if not for the people. All right. And you know what we mean by that. But fundamentally, everything happens. It happens through people and teams and projects and sometimes small teams, sometimes large. And fundamentally, what good leaders do, they're able to engage you to understand why we're trying to go in a direction, how we need to adjust things, and make it understood as to the best way to be successful.
When you said that NASA, everything would be fine except for the people, I was thinking, I used to be the director of institutional research at the University of Colorado, and I'll never forget. I was having some meeting with the administration, and one of the guys said, "Oh, geez, it would go so smoothly if it weren't for the students."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, or think about it, how often I hear nowadays when working with organizations, our problem is our customers. Yeah. It's like, but it's true. It's so that's the challenge of leaders. Good leaders are able to work with people, and people have different ideas, and they have different intentions, and that's the connection to them. And that's why stories are the most important thing, right? We act based on the stories we believe in.
That's right. It reminds me of my opening comment about a future story, because when I've worked with organizations, I've had them tell stories from the present of successes. And then I say, okay, now look at all the things you have done. How do we draw from that and create this story from the future? And when they do that, that they draw from those individual stories of success, and they see it in their future story, and all of a sudden the future story becomes their story because they recognize themselves in it, and it's very powerful.
No, it really is. It's and again, that's why I've always loved, as we know, stories. We've connected on that, but the more I look, it's really such an essential driver, because without a good story, people don't know why. Without a good story, there's no context. There's no emotions.
Exactly.
And the emotions of a story will always dominate data or logic. It's just human nature. It's just what it is. So.
Yep. Well, now, as I recall, you actually wrote a book that had mission somewhere in the title. How does this all relate to what you did in this book?
Yeah. So the book that it came out, thank you for mentioning that, it's The Smart Mission. NASA's lessons for managing knowledge, people, and projects. And it came about really from the standpoint that when I think about what drives success that I often saw at NASA, or if you work in military organizations, or any place that is really project or mission driven has a major advantage in that vision is why we come together. And we come together around many things. We came together at Columbia for different kinds of programs or events. We come together around sharing ideas about leadership and mentoring and working together. And that drives, I think, allows us to understand things without even saying things. Mm-hmm. We know when we get together, I said when you asked me about doing this, I was excited about it. I don't have any, Jen, I don't have really any goals. You always thought, what are the goals? My goals is just to have fun with you. And but you're able to do that because we have a relationship, because we have a history, we've worked together on things. We have, I think, largely the same mission. Mm-hmm. May go in slightly different directions and may be dressed up differently. And so I think that's what the mission is, that purpose. The mission is that concentrated set of stories that say, this is what we're doing. It matters to us. Hopefully it matters to others, the audience. And based on that, we're able to maneuver, nicely together.
I love the word relationship. And I was watching one of my earlier shows, which I do periodically, just as a check for myself. Am I, how am I doing? Did I do what I really thought I had done, et cetera, in the show? Well, there was one where I was talking with Diana Whitney. Now, I've known Diana Whitney for 20 years. And as I'm watching the same phenomenon that you just described between us, I could just see happening on the screen. And I thought, wow, there's one and there's another, but there's this third thing that's clear and evident to me as I'm watching this show. And I was really bowled over that we talk about relationship, but there was that moment where I saw it and it became very real. Well, I hated to cut that off, but I want to bring in today's guest because our topic today is 1 + 1 is 3. And I want to introduce you to John Hovell. John, welcome to Unlocked.
Thank you, Madelyn. Good to see you again. Happy to jump into conversation.
Okay, well, let me give the audience a little background on you because they need to know where you're coming from. And then we will indeed jump into our conversation. John Hovell is the co-founder and CEO of Stratactical. Did I pronounce that right?
You sure did. Perfect.
Oh, good. I had to practice it. He's an award winner multiple times over, and he serves on several advisory boards. He's a speaker, author, and what I like the most, he is a practitioner of organizational development and knowledge management. And if this language is strange to you, don't worry, you'll understand him when he speaks. So, with that in mind, John, you heard a little bit about what Ed and I talked about on vision. How would you refine it?
Wow, it's a fun one. Well, yes, thanks for having me again, and let's jump right in. Refine vision. I mean, just being as straightforward as I can. In my mid-40s, and aware of my white American heterosexual able-bodied privilege and fragility that I have, in mid-30s to mid-40s, there's been quite a bit of work around anxiety for me, my own personal anxiety. And so I bring that up because if I'm true to myself and speak from that place here with you, vision begins to ever so gently spark anxiety for me. So I was really appreciating some of the other sort of variations around vision. Vision to me sounds off in the future, away from this moment. Whereas when Ed talked about purpose, I wrote down resolutions and objectives. And in your open, you talk about possibilities and options.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I'm refining or just sort of expanding the space of probably the same thing we're all trying to talk about and do, but just owning my truth. The word vision takes me out of the moment and ever so gently raises some anxiety for me.
That is a marvelous expansion. Thank you for that. You know, to me, vision is, yes, it is something I'm working toward, but the word purpose, you're right. That's very much tied in for me with my vision, because the vision, if it's not serving my purpose, it doesn't mean anything. But I love the fact that you recognize that it's out there and may actually take you out of the moment, which is not what you want to have happen. That's your best when you're in your moment. Thank you for that expansion. Appreciate that.
Thanks for asking.
Well, but I'm curious now. We have a year in front of us, a new one. Well, almost the whole year. What do you want to accomplish this year?
Yeah. See, accomplishment was one of the other words in that space. So we've got variations on a theme, right? Thinking about moments and time. Sure. Is this whole year comprised of many, many of these moments that we're in right now? So I would bring it back, and Ed said some of this too. He said, having fun with you right now is my purpose, right? So to me, I heard that right here on this call as we're speaking. Let's have fun together. That's what I want to accomplish this year, if that's the right word in that context of what can we do in this moment? What could we explore? What words, what actions, what behaviors, mindset, or my new favorite word, mind flex instead of mindset. Where could we be coming from in this conversation that sets up this year, or that is everything from this year that is going to happen has already happened in this moment? What if we speak from that place?
Wow. You keep challenging me. This is marvelous. Because you're so right. If you get disconnected from the moment, then you don't know where you are. And I was going to answer this question too. What do I want to accomplish this year? And yes, I have some goals. I've got a new program that's going to be announced very shortly for mentoring together. And I'm excited about this because I've been working on this for 2 years, and it's a really going to be very good. But in that, I realize I'm only thinking about doing that because I know I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm going to be doing it with interesting people. I mean, that's one of the reasons I do this show, is that I get to talk to people like you. And I extend out the invitation, and people say, well, of course I'll talk to you, Madelyn. And so I get to talk to all kinds of people all over the world. So I love the fact that you helped me see that my vision is happening in the moment. Thank you.
How about, so is that part of your story? Because that would be a question that's popping up for me now. What's Madelyn's story in this moment with relationship to accomplishment goals, looking forward to a year and getting stuff done? What's the story that you tell yourself?
I think the story that I tell myself is that I have accomplished a great deal in my career. And I always say to people, it's only because my career is so long that I've done so much. And a lot of the story has to do with legacy. I mean, I have all kinds of wisdom that I've gathered. I mean, hell, I've been a manager for, I can't tell you how long. I mean, years. and with success. But I want to share that. And so this gives me the opportunity to share, whether it's on the show, whether it's in my writing of blogs and books and articles, or this upcoming course, a program, I call it really, because it's not a course, it's a program on mentoring. And I also do some individual mentoring, but all of those things are calling upon, forcing me to draw from my well of experience to help others.
I love it. So legacy. And of course, when I think of Madelyn Blair, I often think of storytelling. So sharing the story, right? Like sharing the narrative, whatever that is for you or for anyone else. One of the things I love, because storytelling is often so close to the practice you mentioned, knowledge management at the beginning. And of course, I realize that's not as well known. It's not sort of out there like finance or information technology or human resources or other disciplines, but knowledge management is its own discipline. And in storytelling and in knowledge management, we'll often talk about what are the patterns we see, what's the overarching story that's going on here, and what is the collective part of that story. So we each have a piece of the legacy, and the collective, I think in communications they call it discourse. It's the collective conversation that each one of us may or may not even realize we're actually a piece of the conversation. Even if we don't feel like we're interacting with it, that is still a choice and a part of it.
You know, there's a discipline called social constructionism, which happens to be what my PhD is in. But nobody understands what that is. And you don't understand it until you really immerse yourself in it. And then when you get to the end, you realize, it's just exactly what you said. We are all part of a conversation. And it really does go on. And it doesn't, and I'll never forget my advisor saying to me at one point, he said, of course you're in conversation with Freud, say. It doesn't matter that he's dead. You're still in conversation with him. So, yeah. Well, you know, speaking of which, tell me a little bit about your story and how you got to what you're doing today, and what are you doing today? What is this Stratactical?
Yeah, well said. I hope I know too. Sure. What would be part of the sort of the shared reality aspect of the story? So I started studying engineering and then quickly switched over to business. And in business, what it was called at that point was decision support systems. DSS is what I actually studied and practiced and learned and worked with other people on. Decision support systems, which was honestly mostly software based, writing code and building, websites and applications, these kinds of things. It very quickly for me morphed into, and Ed said some of this too, people, process, and technology. So it became technology supports or enables process supports or enables people. So then trying to have this balance across people and process and technology. So then a bunch of disciplines popped up along the way. So knowledge management, early 2000s for me, popped up. Absolutely love the notion of looking at information management. How do we manage stuff that's been written down in documents, searchable, findable, and tacit knowledge management, stuff that can never be written down. Every time you ask me a question, different neurons fire, a different response comes. I could write it down, but if you ask me again 3 minutes later, I have to write it down differently. Right? So like that kind of tacit knowledge management. Well, then that morphed or emerged into organization development, because what I started to notice or got really passionate about was individuals have knowledge, and just like your title or topic for today, 1 + 1 = 3, relationships and groups have different knowledge than individuals do.
Mm.
And oh no, this was a whole new world of, wow, why do people behave differently in groups? Or why do people behave differently in this moment versus this other moment? So knowledge management, organization development, that led very quickly. So we're still around 2005 or 10, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So first time where I became aware of my own race, my own privilege, my own gender, sexuality, everything that came along with the lived experience I had had, and then being able to be in deeper, real relationship with others. So KM, knowledge management, OD, organization development, what I would still from the beginning would call D&I, diversity and inclusion. It's gone through many different sort of name changes, but diversity and inclusion. That then brings us all the way to today, maybe the last 5, 6, 7 years, a brand new discipline. It may or may not stick around. It's sure grabbed my passion. It's called, well, what's currently being labeled conversational leadership. And the thinking or the hope or the vision is, can we bring together these slightly disparate but related fields, knowledge management, organization development, diversity and inclusion, and one that I didn't mention, Gestalt psychotherapy. So looking deep in the self, looking at patterns and cycle of experience, as they call it in Gestalt, can we bring all of those fields together and say, what if we shine a really bright light on conversation, whatever that means to each of us, especially the relational, not just the conversation I'm having you or with you or the one that you're having with me, the shared, you've said at the very end of your clip with Ed there, the third thing, the relationship, the something between us.
Mm-hmm.
Could we really talk about that?
I love the phrase conversational leadership. It has it has so many implications in my mind. It means that as a leader, I have to be able to converse with people, which means I need to be able to open my mind enough that I hear them and respond. But tell me more about that.
Sure, I love it. What sparks for me as you say that is we do talk about this quite a bit and write about it in conversational leadership. I'm forgetting the person's name. I wish I could give credit. Ron Heifetz says, and I'm going to mess up the quote because I don't have the words right in front of me, but it's something to the effect of, leadership is not a role or a position. Leadership is an option. Now, we need to be careful with that because different race, different gender, different culture, leadership may not be an option, right? The system, the culture, you may be blocked from it. Now, but if we can hold on to leadership is not my job title. Leadership is something that I can sort of step in, step out of leading. Now, I do like to often reference Henry Mintzberg, who basically says, and I find this very provocative, so I hope it's helpful for others or provocative for others, we need to get rid of the term leadership. We've tried since the 60s, maybe the 70s, to talk about leadership and leadership development and build better leaders. And this person needs to step up and lead, right? Unfortunately, there's this bifurcation, there's this confusion, there's this separation of when we check in with young children or as we start to study and look at leadership, if I'm quite direct with it, it means yell and tell. Whoever yells the loudest, whoever tells the most clearly, Ed talked about it, whoever defines reality the best, as if there's a best or a one way, you are a leader. You're a good leader. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. It's now an individualistic sport where there's competition and good and better and best. And don't lead like that. That's wrong. We've tried for decades to say, that's not really what we meant. We mean, you're not a leader without followers. There's a group and we're doing what's best for the group. But there's one person that does it best. Be like them. Henry Mintzberg says, give up, move on. Let's actually reframe it. Let's create a new English language word. Let's call it community-ship.
Community-ship.
And he very clearly tries to say he's not talking about shared leadership. He's actually talking about trying to bring words around a fundamentally different concept. How can we get groups to achieve or work or relate in what's best, in what's present and needed by the group itself?
This reminds me of a conversation I was having about a month ago, where someone was really concerned about leaders. And what she was describing were the behaviors that she saw. But she kept defining it in terms of the role. And the role and the behaviors are very different, I think. And what you're saying here is the community-ship. Then it becomes a question of what are the behaviors that in the group, I want to say, they use the word facilitates the direction. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, mindset, skill set, tool set is popping up for me, similar to people, process, technology, but now thinking. Dr. Patricia Shaw has a beautiful quote where her definition of leadership is convening conversations that otherwise wouldn't have happened.
Wow.
Right? And that sticks with me too. It's a powerful, what is the conversation I need to have? What is the conversation you need to have? And of course, you know where I'm going. What is the conversation we
need to have?
Which may or may not be my need.
Yeah.
There could be a third thing. And then there's one other person, David White, who says, he adds a question before that. He says, and this is an interesting one. This one I think can be debated. I'd love your thoughts on this one. David White says, as a poet, so beautifully in words, he says, what's the conversation that we first need to stop engaging in? Part of me agrees with that, and part of me is frustrated by that. Because if we're stopping in it, are we giving up, or are we trying to move past something, or are we just not skilled? But I don't know. Can I ask, if you hear that question, what's the conversation you need to stop engaging in? What emotions pop up for you in that one?
I got to do a little thinking here, because you're right. You asked about emotions, and I need to touch those now. I'm excited about that, because it says, okay, Madelyn, you need to be thinking about a conversation that is not generative. And when you move into a conversation that is not generative, it's not giving you life. It is not giving the other person life. It's not giving the group life. You have to stop it. That's very exciting. It's a different way to ask the question, or it's a different way to say it. Normally, I would say when we speak, we should be speaking appreciatively, generatively, so you focus there. But yes, I think that David White may be right, that when you want to really get better, more effective, I don't know what the right word would be, you then need to make some judgments that this piece of the conversation is not generative. I must either remove myself or help it to stop continuing.
It always is interesting for me too, since I brought emotions in. I'm curious myself, the polarity, the back and forth that's jumping up in my mind now is, how can each one of us discern or be aware of generative versus necessary? Right? Some kind of wait, this feels painful. this is not helping me. I'm not enjoying this, but it is necessary. That could be a challenge, right?
Well, you're touching on one of my favorite topics, which is discomfort. We try to avoid discomfort. And I'm sorry, there are moments when life is uncomfortable. And sometimes they're necessary. Well, I won't go into that right now. But this aspect of comfort being related to generative, I always say being comfortable does not guarantee safety. It just doesn't. So in those moments when you are uncomfortable, then I think you do pose a good question, which is this uncomfortable because it is necessary but difficult, or is it uncomfortable because this is killing people and it will lead nowhere? It's not generative. So in the first case, yes, you have to persist. In the second case, then you can make the choice to withdraw.
So having choices and possibilities, options, as you mentioned at the very beginning.
That's right. You got to get those choices in there. Wow. So we're at this place. So we're talking about this conversational leader, even though we may want to call this person a community ship. But community ship, but of course, we talk about citizenship, which is you as a person contributing to the larger, maybe it's citizenship.
Could be. That's definitely been mentioned. The thing that I think, at least for me, pops up a little bit with citizenship, it sort of begins with the individual again. It sounds like the individual citizen belonging to something bigger. Whereas I think communityship, the part of the intent is to move towards, what if we begin with the collective? What if we begin with the relationships? Begin with a shared reality, a shared context. What does that look like? How do you behave or think or feel or, again, relate? Beginning from that place.
Yeah. That is different. You're right. So here's the challenge. All right. I'm a professional. Okay. I don't mean Madelyn Blair. I'm just taking on that persona right now. I'm a professional. I recognize from what John and Madelyn have been talking about that there's something about how I act in the world that I need to be more conscious of. What does this person do? Because in the end, they're going to be making a choice, and that's often an individual thing.
Yeah. What do you do? Actions. I guess I can only really share my own personal. So you were asking sort of journey and path and what got us here, and that maybe is still a little bit open. It's a thing that comes into mind right away for me. Classic exercise that I think many people have done, but certainly not everyone. The good old Johari Window. The Johari Window, a 2x2 matrix that many people have seen before. I've done it enough times. I should have it memorized. Let's see if I do. The column headers are what I know about myself and what I don't know about myself. And the row headers are what others know about me and what others don't know about me. So those intersections create 4 boxes. The real intent of the Johari Window is to take the what I know about me and what others know about me, that shared reality of we all know this, and expand that box out by doing 2 things. You expand out what others know about me, which I guess is the box going down, by revealing, sharing, being full self as most as you're aware of. You expand to the right by requesting feedback. How did this land for you? What is the impact of what I just said? And are you aware of it? And are we in a safe enough space or a brave enough space, a courageous space where you can step in and offer some in the moment real-time feedback? That's a very action-oriented first step, I guess.
It is a great first step, and it tells me why I have worked in story for so long and bring it into almost anything that I'm working on, whether I'm teaching a student, I'm working with a mentor, a mentee, working with a manager, it doesn't matter. Because when you share stories, you are in fact opening up the garment and saying, this is a little piece of me.
Mm.
You did that this in this show. You opened a piece of you. And that's that opening of the Johari window. I like that example. And simultaneously, as you tell that story, it is informing you as well. Because one of the practices that I recommend in my book is you should write a story from your life every day. It can even be the same story. And I tell people, because every time you write the story, it comes out different because your mind says, oh, you want a little bit more detail. Oh, here's another piece and here's another piece. And it's very revelatory. You really begin to understand why you were formed a particular way. Now, in groups, when you begin to share those back and forth, that really comes to this business of communityship, because what I've done in groups, and what I've seen, I should say, is when they do that, the level of comfort and trust goes up, even when they're talking about difficult things, because they know more about that other person. Oh, but I know that person because I've heard this story and it relates to me and my story. So
Chris Collison has this great exercise called the River of Life. I don't know if he created it or I always think of him first, but you literally, you start to draw, and this is the little aha moment I had as you were just speaking. It's typically, again, an individual exercise. You can do it multiple times. It's what makes it a great template. The first time you do it, you might do it based on like what car you've driven, or maybe you would do it what country or city you've lived in. If you've moved a lot, maybe you would do it based on what job you had, right? You draw and you are supposed to shape the river. Like, where was it curvy? Where was it smooth? Where was it up? Where was it down? Right? You draw the river of life. And then once you finish the whole drawing, you step back and look at, wow, so that's where I am. I wonder where it's going to go next. I've never thought about drawing the river of life of a group, which would be very different from all of the individual rivers. It's a nice visualization, nice depiction of it.
Yeah. Fascinating. That one seems so overwhelming to me.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, sometimes you have to do overwhelming things. You just have to say, okay, this is important and I'm going to do it. Now, for me, that was like, oh, wow. I would much rather tell you this. I would rather tell you the story about the time I fell on the sidewalk, or the time, you know, that's because that one I understand. I can see it. I can hold it in my hand. I can share it with you. Whatever.
The pivotal stories, the before and after moments.
Yes.
Those. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Well, one of the things I'd like to do on this show is always leave people with things that they can do. Even though they may all begin individually, you still have to be willing as an individual to act. So let's see if we can take this really, to me, a very exciting conversation and make it something that an individual can say, yeah, I understand that. Now, this is something I can do. Now, my one example is write a story every day.
Sure.
But there's other things. Help me, John.
Yeah, sure. Endless. Use of self is a concept that goes across multiple of those disciplines I talked about. Dr. Mayan Chen Judge. So if you're a reader, a researcher, you want to read or watch a concept and then try to go out and practice it. Use of self. It's also known as self as an instrument. If you go out and you Google or you search or you find any write-ups on use of self, to me, it's endless fascination of raising self-awareness, seeing your character, seeing your courage, seeing, because part of use of self is self, other, and situation. Who am I? Who is the other person? And what's going on? And so in use of self, there's a lot of questions and a lot of practice around, am I aware of what's going on? To what depth or extent, again, your possibilities and your options. Just in, where are my words coming from? Why did I share that story? What was my intent? Then what was the impact of me sharing that story? That constant practice of what is my, the other way they describe it is I played trumpet, growing up as an instrument. Still love the trumpet. If you're going to play the trumpet, you have to learn the physical instrument. You have to learn the valves and how to clean the valves and how to go sharp and flat and, learn the physical instrument. In this kind of human and people-based work, the body is the instrument. So that then brings me maybe to the second point of use of self would be one thing. Another one I would say, just owning my own story again, is the education system I was brought up in was very neck and above. Very smart, very intelligent, very taking a test, very memorizing, passing a test, understanding concepts, right? We had physical education, but it was viewed differently from the rest of the classes. We had music education viewed differently. It's been extraordinarily impactful for me to first move from the head down to do body work, to be much more aware of emotions, heart, hands. Even as you're asking the question, what's something we can do? What fires up in my body? I notice the energy in my hands. And just for me to feel brave enough to say those strange words, you feel energy in your hands. So what are you even saying? No, that's actually really important data. Because if I didn't feel energy in my hands, to me, my hands represent action. Go do something. I also feel energy in my knees right now. And I know that's from nervous, fear, anxiety, right? This has taken years to be able to get out of my head, get into my body, and be able to speak it and own it and be in my experience and want to be in that experience with other people. That's back to the 1 + 1 = 3. Because there's a shared thing that I'm only a part of.
As you were describing before I do that, I think what we want to do, John, for the benefit of the audience, is maybe after the show, we'll do a list of these references and I can post it on my website so that people can get to that. All right. All right. So what was I going to really say about this? See, I do that to myself. I distract myself and then my mind goes, oh, you don't want to talk about that? All right. And it drops it.
See which theme comes back.
Yeah, see which theme comes. I know what it was now. Yes. As you were describing this aspect of the story and the other person and the situation, it reminded me of something that Paul Costello and I used to do together called narrative practice. And that was very much about how a person could take a story from their life that actually didn't have an end. And they would tell the story to an audience. And by the audience, it would be people who were trained in listening to that. And then there would be a moment when, and of course, there are all kinds of rules around this. It's not, I'm just abbreviating it. But in the end, what you were really talking about with the person is your reactions to the story. Where did I feel this story? Where did what was the sense around me when I was listening to your story? And then you begin to tell them what you saw coming from the story. It's incredibly powerful. And I'm thinking to myself, this could be a potential way to help a community develop their communityship.
Sure. It reminds me, I think you and I have done this experience together. And tell me if I'm giving the wrong credit. Seth Kahan and his the getting in groups of 3 and telling a story over 3 rounds, that one? Mm-hmm. Should we share that really quick in case?
Go ahead.
So my experience of it, and I think you can really improve upon it. You get a group of people together, and this is what I'm liking in this thread of questions we've got here. Like, what are some things? What are some actions I can do? And I am sort of leaning towards what are some actions that a group can do. So this is a group exercise. So for anybody listening, this would be the courage of getting 5, 10, 20 people together and practicing narrative, tacit knowledge, organization development, use of self in a group setting, which I think is scary for most everybody. The way this one works is relatively quick exercise. Everybody forms random groups of 3. And the instructions, if I remember them correctly, are think of a true story where you're the main character that you can tell in less than 3 minutes.
Mhm.
Okay, so then you get in groups of 3. Each person in the group tells their story. Okay, and then you rotate. You randomly go form a new group of 3. You tell the exact same story again. And of course, like you just said, Madelyn, you notice that you tell the story different because you're probably watching the reaction of the people. Are they bored? Are they excited? Are they in tears? Are they laughing? Is
Mhm.
that different from the last group I just told the same story to? Then you do it a third time. So I always mess up the math, but I think that means you've heard 8 different stories. Is that right? 3 plus 3 plus 2, I think. Maybe count your own. The big finale of the whole exercise, and of course, it's my favorite part because it is funny. It's hard to do this virtual, but you can definitely do this in person. Then what you do is the facilitator asks everyone to start to make eye contact with the most impactful story that they just heard. So you're starting to look around the room. You have to think, who was an impactful story? What does impactful mean? And then you're directed to go put your hand on the shoulder of the
Mhm.
person that told the most impactful story.
Mhm.
And then, like you said, the debrief after. Whoever has the most hands on their shoulder is offered the opportunity to share the story with the whole group. And then we debrief. What did you mean by impactful? Why did that story impact you? Let's hear from the storyteller.
Mhm.
Was it impactful for you? How did you tell the story differently each time? You sort of unpack
Yeah.
storytelling and
Those,
impact. So there you go.
those are remarkably fun exercises. I remember the long chains of people that would be forming because you couldn't all get up and put your hand on a particular. Ah, those were those were very interesting.
Pre-pandemic exercises.
That's right.
Yep.
Yes, you'd have to think about that one before
Yep.
you get into
Yep.
it. Ah, gosh. Yes. Seth is still continuing to do his work in a slightly different mode now, but he does continue. Yeah. Well, we've talked about a lot of things, and I'm going to put you on the spot. Tell us a little bit about the results you've seen in your work. I mean, obviously, you're trying to help organizations really use the concepts that you've been talking about. You probably don't go into such detail with them, but what do you see happening in those groups?
Yeah, wow. I love it. It is a tricky question. And it's tricky for me because, like non-disclosure or
Mhm.
sharing someone else's story.
Yeah.
I've got a few that pop to mind. I'm trying to really quickly genericize a story so that I feel
Okay.
comfortable sharing it. Okay, I can give you the context for sure. So imagine a large oil and gas company, I think I will say that, who's trying to go through a transformation. Okay, so they're sort of trying to, let me, just to make it really safe then, think of like decades ago when Coca-Cola made, carbonated Coke, right? And then at some point, one of their CEOs said, actually, we're in the liquid business or the re-energy business. It wasn't just Coca-Cola. And then they opened up, flavored waters and power drinks, and right, it opened up a whole new world. So this real life oil and gas company, one of our clients, is trying to do that kind of major transformation. Oil and gas, but shift to different types of energy. Okay.
Mhm.
Senior leadership team gets together and they say, we've heard of this conversational leadership thing. We've read the book. We're really interested in it. We can't quite picture it or imagine it. Would you mind just coming and being with us? Could you come and just be part of a leadership offsite? It was all virtual, so everybody was, at home in their pajamas anyway. I've probably already given too much context, but here we go anyway. What I would say, without giving the content, individuals and groups that are willing to step into their truth,
Mhm.
that are willing to, in Patricia Shaw's words, Dr. Shaw's words, convene the conversation that otherwise wouldn't have happened. You know what? Here's what I'll do. I'm sorry, I'm going to put it back to a theory. Dr. Ed Schein and his son, whose birthday is today, by the way, they came up with a model for this, and I think this may be the better way. So sorry to kind of close that story and turn it into a takeaway model or theory. Ed Schein talks about 4 levels of conversation. Level -1, and we'll give links to the book and all. Level -1 is, I'm going to mess up his words, but coercive conversations.
Mhm.
There's a time and a place for that. If the house is on fire,
That's
we don't
right.
have time to debate it. Do we go out the window or do we go out the door? Let's talk about it. Let's go, right? Coercive conversations. That's level -1, as he calls it. Level 1 conversations, he skips over 0, are transactional conversations.
Mhm.
What's the task? What's the update on the task? What movies do you like? Can you give me the status of what you're working on? What are your current struggles right now? Those are all transactional
Mhm.
conversations. Okay. Level 2 conversations are what he calls emotional conversations. It means two different things. It means, are you willing and able and aware of how you feel right now? Again, get out of your head, get into your body, get into your heart. Are you scared, happy, anxious, afraid? There's a whole tool called the feelings wheel that gives you words for all the
Mhm.
different emotions you're likely feeling right now. That's level 2. Can you talk about emotions, and are you aware of your emotions? That is a different type of conversation than transactional or coercive. His top level, level 3 conversations are what he calls, I'm going to mess up his words, sorry, spiritual conversations or soulful conversations. It's, are you aware of your own patterns across your life? You always feel sad. You always feel happy. You always feel anxious. You always feel angry, right? Can you hold a conversation from your own patterns as opposed to how you feel in this moment, right? That's a level 3 conversation. In conversational leadership, we've added one more level, what we call shared identity conversations.
Hmm.
This is me looking at my patterns, speaking from there, you looking at your patterns, speaking from there, and us looking at our patterns and speaking from there. Those conversations are exceptionally rare. What I've kind of left out now is level -1 and level 1 conversations, transactions and coercive. Unfortunately, I don't think anybody's ever done the real research, but if I make up a number, I would say 99% of my life's conversations fit in those buckets.
Wow.
Very few are emotional or spiritual or soulful or shared identity conversations. That's what happened with that leadership group. They moved to a shared identity conversation,
Mm.
which they had never done before.
Fabulous. Wow. This has been a remarkable conversation. And as actually, I was going to say, and it came to an unexpected place, but no, I really expected it to go to an unexpected place. But it's just been fabulous. I'm sitting here saying thank you is not enough, because you've enriched. I think you've enriched the whole field by what you have done. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm feeling grateful too, because that river of life, that was a true aha. I hadn't thought about a group drawing their story. So thank you. I'm grateful.
And we ought to talk about that more.
Okay. Sounds good.
Well, again, thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wow. What an amazing conversation, as I actually anticipated when I invited John to be with me. Well, I've often talked about building relationships and how highly resilient people have strong social support, which means established, ongoing, and supportive relationships. And now I'm really excited about the idea of thinking about a whole community of doing that. These highly resilient people don't necessarily have a million of them, but the ones they have are consistent. So always keep in mind that relationships are sustained through conversation that is genuine, authentic, and appreciative. And I think John has added a few more characteristics, which I won't go over again. You'll just have to watch the replay. Take some time today and ask yourself, who is in your support circle? Who is it that always will support you or challenge you in a supportive way? I think you may be surprised. Then I suggest that you reach out to them and tell them how much you appreciate that. Thank you for joining me on this segment of Unlocked. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.